Hey friends, welcome back to my kitchen. I'm going to be doing some baking today, and I thought it was a good opportunity to do a little experimenting as well. I haven't made loaf bread in quite some time, and I feel like I need to do that more. I've been into doing like the pull-apart buns and different things, which are great. I love those. But sometimes you just need a slice of bread. So I'm going to make a couple of loaves today. I am going to attempt a buttermilk loaf. I ordered this buttermilk powder, I don't know how long. It was quite a long time ago, and I was gonna experiment with it, but then I went dairy-free, and I wasn't excited about experimenting with it after that. But now that I've added a little bit more dairy back to my life, I'm going to try it out and see how it goes. I know that Wendy from Loving It on Keto has done lots of experimenting with the buttermilk powder, and she uses it. I think she says it's her favorite. Her favorite bread has buttermilk powder in it, so I'm excited to try that out. I'm going to do one loaf with the buttermilk powder. I'm just going to use my best egg white bread recipe, and I'm just going to sub out the butter powder for the buttermilk powder, and then I'm also going to make a loaf with the butter powder so that I can compare them back to back. Sometimes just tasting them back to back helps to be able to see the subtle differences. So one thing I wanted to point out is that the buttermilk powder does have more carbs than the butter powder. For a tablespoon of buttermilk powder, it's 4 carbs, and for a tablespoon of butter powder, it's less than 1 carb. So there is a pretty significant difference. I use 1/4 of a cup of butter powder in the recipe, so that's going to change the carb content amount on the bread, but the bread is already so low in carbs that it's not a huge deal. It's not a deal breaker, but it's gonna have to taste pretty dang delicious to make it worth those extra carbs to me. So we'll see. I'll go over my ingredients real quick. I have water, of course, egg white powder, some beef gelatin powder, but any unflavored gelatin will work, salt, allulose, arrowroot starch. I use a little bit of this, and actually this is all I have left. So I think I'm gonna do just 1 tablespoon in each loaf, even though the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons. It is an optional ingredient. If you want the lowest carb count possible, you can omit it. I just think it adds a little bit extra to the texture and the flavor. Cream of tartar. And then dried egg yolks. You can either use whole egg powder, 2 tablespoons of whole egg powder, or 2 teaspoons of egg yolk powder, and they both have the same effect. I'm going to be using the yolk powder today, and then of course in the first loaf I will have the buttermilk powder. In the second loaf I will have the butter powder. I'm going to start by turning on my oven to preheat to 325. And then I'm going to go ahead and get my pans ready just so I don't have the batter sitting for any length of time. I do have a video on how I get my parchment paper to lay down flat. Pretty simple process, just 2 strips, 1 skinny one down the middle, and then a wider one on the side. I'm going to do my 1 1/4 cups of water in each bowl, 295 milliliters. Now I'm going to sprinkle my 1 teaspoon of gelatin over the top of each bowl of water. Next, I'm going to add 100 grams of egg white powder or egg white protein powder, same thing, to each bowl. One 1/4 cup of allulose, which comes to about 36 grams. One tablespoon of arrowroot to each bowl. I might have enough to do 2 tablespoons, just barely, so we'll go ahead and do that. 1/2 teaspoon of Redmond real salt, and 1 1/2 teaspoons of cream of tartar. And if you don't like the sour taste that the cream of tartar gives, you can reduce it down to 1/2 teaspoon. I like the sour taste. I think it makes it taste a little bit like sourdough, so I like the little bit extra, but you can still get the same effect on the batter just by doing a half a teaspoon. My oven is preheated. Before I get these over to the mixer, I am going to weigh out my ingredients that I add at the end. I don't add any of these before whipping because that will keep the batter from whipping. Anything with fat in it has to be saved to the end and mixed in after the egg whites have whipped up. Otherwise, they won't whip up. So I'm gonna do 2 teaspoons of yolk powder in each bowl. And 1/4 of a cup of butter powder is 24 grams. So I'm gonna add that one here to the blue bowl. Gotta keep them straight. And I'm just gonna do the exact same weight of the buttermilk powder in the other one. So the buttermilk powder is gonna be less fat. It says 0 grams of fat per tablespoon, but it's gotta have some fat in it. Maybe it's just not enough to register with the 1 tablespoon serving, but we'll see how that affects it. 24 grams. I'm just gonna give this a little mix to make sure everything is incorporated, and then we'll be ready to get whipping. Just gonna give this a quick stir to get everything moistened before I take it over to the mixer. And I'll go ahead and get this whipped up, add in the fat powders, and get it in the pan and in the oven because I don't want to whip up both of these and then let them sit. I'm just gonna do one at a time so that the batter doesn't deflate too much. I'm gonna start the mixer on low and increase the speed to high gradually, and then whip it on high for 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how long it takes to get very thick. Okay, I'm gonna do the buttermilk first. So I have my buttermilk powder mixture. I'm gonna mix that up just until it's combined. Not gonna whip it at this point. Gonna give the batter a quick stir just to make sure everything got incorporated really well. This one is ready to go. I'm gonna throw it in the oven and set my first timer for 40 minutes, and then I'm gonna get the second batch whipped up. Butter powder batter is done. And mix that real good, get it in the pan, throw it in the oven. I'll be about 10 minutes behind the other one. I'm noticing that the buttermilk batter did not deflate as much as the butter powder batter. And I think that's probably just because of it has less fat. The buttermilk powder has less fat. The fat is what causes it to deflate after you add it to the batter. And you might think that's a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing because it gives the finished bread a nice bubbly texture inside. Instead of like really tight memory foam, it has nice air bubbles and it's more bread-like. So that's a good thing. The butter powder seems to be doing that a little bit more than the buttermilk powder, but they both still have the yolk powder. So I think there'll be plenty of fat in both of them to get a really good texture still. And into the oven this one goes. The timer just beeped on the buttermilk bread, and I'm gonna check it, make sure it looks all the way done. Definitely feels done. Look at how amazing that turned out. Super tall. When I check for doneness, basically all I do is I press the top and make sure it doesn't feel like gushy or wet inside. This is definitely very firm. I might have been able to take it out like 5 minutes ago, because it feels pretty firm, but it's definitely done. I'm gonna go ahead and take it out of the pan. Since I have it on the parchment paper, it makes it super easy. And we will let that cool. Ooh, don't wanna burn myself. So far, it looks absolutely gorgeous. Wow. The butter bread is done. It also looks beautiful. Let's pull that out of the pan real quick. Ooh. They both look beautiful, I must say. I'm gonna let them both cool down all the way, and then I will give a slice and show the texture and do a taste test. I'm gonna get these sliced up in just a second, but first I wanted to show you these cutting boards that I was just sent from EliHome. If you guys remember, they donated cutting board sets for my 100,000 subscriber giveaway. I've been using their cutting boards for quite a while now, love them, but they just came out with this new version that has these non-slip silicone corners on them. Oh my gosh, I am so excited about this. I had actually just been looking on Amazon for some kind of a silicone mat or something that I could put under my cutting boards to keep them from sliding around while I'm cutting, especially when I'm doing a video, like especially with the time lapse when I'm slicing something and the cutting board is sliding everywhere, it looks terrible. So when they contacted me and asked if I wanted to try this new style, I was super excited. I do have a discount code, 15% off on the EliHome cutting boards. You can find that down in the description. And then right now they're having a special deal on top of the 15% off, where if you buy a set of cutting boards, you get a free set of their spatulas, which I also have and I also love. So definitely go check those out if you are in need of cutting boards. I'm gonna be using this one today for my bread. I love how massive this is. It's perfect. All right, let me cut into the buttermilk loaf first. Let me see. They feel about the same in weight, which is to be expected. So as I anticipated, since the batter didn't deflate as much when I added the buttermilk and yolk powder, there's not as many air bubbles in there. It's a little bit tighter of a texture. It's still very soft. Smells delicious, but it does have that little bit tighter of a texture. I expect the butter bread will have more air bubbles. Just set that there. All right, let's check this butter bread out. Yeah, so you can see there, you've got more of the air bubbles, and that just comes from the fat, the extra fat in the butter powder. And I think if I remember right, Wendy from Loving It on Keto does a mixture of butter powder and buttermilk powder in hers. So she probably gets a really nice texture from doing that. And then the flavor from doing the buttermilk powder. So let me give you a view of these side by side. Not a huge difference, but you can see the bigger bubbles. And then also the butter powder bread did not sink in on the sides. Hardly at all. The buttermilk bread did a little bit. And again, that's just from not deflating as batter. When it doesn't deflate as much when it's batter, it tends to deflate more after it's baked, which is kind of interesting. But this one with the butter powder, you still got the really nice sides. The bottom is super flat, very little sinkage, if any. Looks are important with the bread, but obviously the taste is the thing that matters the most. So let's do a quick taste test. I'll do a tear here for you of the butter bread. That's what the inside looks like. I'm gonna taste this just to remind myself what it tastes like. Delicious and soft and just a hint of the butter flavor. All right, now I'm gonna taste this one, buttermilk. There is a little bit more of a tang. I like to put that extra amount of cream of tartar in my bread. That does give it a tang, but this definitely has more of a tang to it, like a yogurty buttermilk type tang. The flavor is actually quite good. Okay, I'm calling the buttermilk bread a win, and I am interested in trying maybe like half butter powder, half buttermilk powder, and getting the bigger bubbles from the more fat, but then getting that little bit of the buttermilk tang from the buttermilk powder. I think that's going to be a winner. So thank you so much for coming along on this experiment today. I'm going to be enjoying both of these loaves of bread over the next week or so. I hope you guys are all doing great, and I will see you again in the next video.